go back in history and look at America, the reasons why America has entered into wars, I would say typically it is on false premise. Did you support the Iraq War after 9/11?
No.
Why not?
We get into wars for the wrong reasons. I'm not for policing the world.
Did you support the Iraq
I did.
War? Why?
At the time, I was overly scared of terrorism.
This is Rhodium Radio, a place where we explore ideas and challenge your worldview. For more episodes, go to rhodiumradio.com.
America is a theocracy. God is money.
Most information these days is being weaponized.
I think Chris used to deny climate change. He acknowledges it, but he's not sure it's man-made. Is that accurate?
We like to act like science is this perfect thing, but science has been wrong a lot.
The wealth gap is not sustainable. You're going to end up with a revolution on your hands.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Rhodium Radio. Today we're talking about war. Is there a formula for war? Is it possible that America has figured out a way to get into war that seems to work every single time? You know, there's a time for war, but there's also a time for peace. How do we know the difference? How can we maintain cool heads when private interests seem to drive the military-industrial complex, seemingly more often than not? In this episode, we're going to discuss how America has gotten into war in history, the why, the how, the pattern. And have you ever heard of Operation Northwoods? The idea of a false flag. If you haven't, there are some newly declassified documents that reveal a recipe or formula for getting into war that may not be as strange as what we've once thought. And you know, the war drums for Iran are beginning to be heard. What's about to happen? But before we jump in, I want to thank our sponsor for today's episode, Not a Trace. Whether you believe in climate change or not, whether it's man-made or not, there is something we can all agree on. And that is pollution is ruining many of the things we love. For example, the amount of plastic being dumped in the ocean is wreaking havoc on coral and marine life. And if you like to scuba dive, this is no bueno. Not a Trace is on a mission to do something about that. They've got some great products, all centered around replacing many of the plastic items we dispose of daily. So take a look, see what you think. Not a Trace has a lot of things that I think you would enjoy. Go to notatrace.co and enter code RHODIUM at checkout for 10% off. Okay, let the war drums commence.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about Iran. Before we get into that, I want to ask you guys a few questions. So, number one, did you support the Iraq War after 9/11?
No.
Why not?
This is where I answer honestly, or am I supposed to answer like, oh, lead people into the subject? Because I think that we get into wars for the wrong reasons. I'm not for policing the world.
Huh. Mm-hmm. Oh, look at you. Chris,
that's even coming from a guy who says he's a Christian.
Did you support the Iraq War?
I did.
Why?
At the time, I was overly scared of terrorism. And like most people, I'm like, oh, we need to go kick some butt. So that's obviously, I've changed my view. You can probably tell by my answer.
Did you support America's intervention into Libya?
Definitely not.
Did you, Chris?
No.
All right. So just to give a little bit of background about what is going on with Iran. So tensions with Iran have been escalating of late. America has said that Iran is reneging on their agreement for creating uranium.
Can I ask who in America is saying that? Like
Bolton, Trump, Pompeo.
Okay, so high up officials making these claims. Okay.
Yeah. So tensions have been rising. Then supposedly, according to, again, the American government, Iran bombed or set off mines, I guess, on oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, I want to say it is. Where is it?
It is.
Okay. So they bombed two tankers Then they supposedly attacked 2 more tankers. And then just of yesterday, Iran shot down a U.S. military drone that was flying over their airspace.
That's what's been claimed?
No, that happened.
Oh, that's true.
That happened.
You're 100% sure?
Yeah, Iran said it. America agreed. That took place.
Okay, all right.
That's fact. Now, the bombings of the tankers, Iran said, we did not do it. America said they did it, though. And a lot of America's allies are like, we're not sold on this fact. And even the ship that was supposedly bombed, because they said they put mines like underneath on the hull of the ship. But the people who were on the ship said, no, the attack was above water.
But did you read the guy's statement? It was a little questioning too. Did you read it? I'll find it.
You're saying the guy who owns the boat, right?
No, the guy that was on the boat that they got this from, that he's like, he basically said it was a missile. I think he said it came from the air. But he also was like, at the end of his statement, he's like, I mean, honestly, I have no idea. It was a little sketchy.
I felt like I read, though, the guy who actually owns the boat say, no, that's not actually what happened. Like, he's refuting some of these official reports, which was interesting.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So I don't think it was just one guy who refuted it. I think it was a few people. But
yeah, there were a number of articles that you're right.
So right now, America has sent, I want to say, 1,500 more troops to the region. So they're pretty much gearing up for war. And American people seem to be, for the most part, I mean, the American public is easily swayed to go to war. So the question is, do we believe that Iran actually attacked these boats, oil tankers, and do we believe that going to war with Iran is a good thing? So,
okay.
And I would say my standpoint is, number one, if we go back in history and look at America, the reasons why America has entered into wars, I would say typically it is on false premise. So going back to the Iraq War, which the American public was really on board with, we entered into the Iraq War halfway because of 9/11, halfway because they had weapons of mass destruction, supposedly, which turned out to be not true. So Iraq is in turmoil. We went to Libya because apparently Gaddafi was, I don't know,
doing something.
Doing something. Libya's in turmoil. So what reason do we have to go to our war with Iran? What is the proposed outcome that we're looking for?
All right. I would, all right, I got to answer this. How do I say this? Peace. Because they are a threat to Israel. That's one argument, right? Right? I mean, they're not, are they a threat to America? Maybe that is an argument. Like we would do well to at least address what would people's arguments be. We need to go to Iran because
I think the likelihood that they will get a nuclear weapon is the biggest reason that we view Iran as a emerging threat.
Okay, yeah, I think that's accurate.
Whether they're going to use that on Israel or us, I say anybody who espouses that, if anybody who espouses another country deserves to be wiped off the face of the earth, is a potential threat.
Death to America.
Yeah, Iran definitely does that. So
okay,
I'm like there's some level of threat. I don't know how.
So yeah, that would be an argument.
And I would say I do like a world where we try to limit the amount of people who get nuclear weapons.
Right, but we were doing that.
I know. I didn't.
No, I'm just saying.
Don't be all defensive, Tim.
I'm just saying.
You asked a question, we answered it, and we're trying to answer it.
And now I'm giving a response to your response.
I know, and we probably agree with you on that response. But that's what I was going to say with that is, to me, the Iran issue is the greatest detriment of our current political system, where we have presidents that serve 4 to 8 year terms.
Why is that? Explain.
We got to have a consistent foreign policy strategy. Are we going to be diplomatic with Iran, or we're going to take them to war? I mean, if you're an Iranian leader, you got to think, how could we ever deal with these people? Either way, every couple of years, there's a drastic 180 in foreign policy. Keep in mind, Iran was our ally in the Middle East.
Up till when?
870 something.
And
Okay.
what happened? Why are they no longer? Why did they fall out of grace to be our ally?
Well, they stopped doing what we wanted. I'm just saying we were that was a democratically elected government. Like they were one of the most progressive Middle East governments in the region.
Well, really, what happened was the fact that America decided to take advantage of Iran and their oil, and America basically put someone in power who began taking advantage of the Iranian people. And what happens when you take advantage of people? They revolt against that, and they tend to go to the extreme opposite of what you have proposed, which is what happened. So, extreme Islam took root, if you want to call it that. I guess some people might not call it that, but
Sure.
and so now they say death to America. So really, America created this problem, which is typically what America does.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so my whole point with that is we can't just dismiss Iran as not a problem in the world. They're a threat to America. Again, is it the same threat as China? I don't think so. I think China's probably a bigger threat to us financially and in terms of safety even.
But not.
But Iran is a threat. And so like Obama's way of dealing with that threat was through diplomacy. He said, look, we've done them wrong in the past. Let's reach out and set a new era of understanding. And I can't say I always say I don't know because I don't get to reclassify documents. So it's hard for me to have foreign policy expertise, but I was okay with the new approach because the old approach wasn't working. We had sanctions on them. They still said death to America, right? The Soviet Union still sold them tons of weapons, so they're still a threat to the region. Like, they still were developing nuclear weapons, so I was okay with the new approach. I'm frustrated as all get out now because it's like, well, it's ruined because how could Iran ever trust us again? Mm-hmm. You know, if they were. I don't know if they were. Maybe they were screwing us. I don't know.
So I would say whenever you're looking at a present-day issue, you should look to the past to gain some insights, right? So if we look at the last couple of wars that America has entered into and look at two things. Number one, the causes that the things that caused us to enter into the war and the results of those wars, right? So if we go back to the world wars, right? What was the reason why we entered into World War II? Do any of you guys know? Or what was the...
World War II, I'm not familiar.
Are you familiar?
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, like the real reason or the potential threat?
Well, no,
I mean, Pearl Harbor.
I'm sorry. World War I. World War One. Which one was it when they bombed the Lusitania?
I think that would have been one. Want me to look it up?
Look at my head. Clearly, I'm a great history.
That's
buff.
World War One, I believe. Because Pearl Harbor is World War II.
Yep, that was right. The RMS Lusitania.
Yeah.
So it was a boat? I found that very interesting.
Yeah. So it was a boat that the Germans claimed was carrying munitions. Hence why they blew it up. And the Americans said, no, it was just carrying people. And so this was our rationale for entering into the war. Because now they're bombing, they're killing innocent people, right?
But I think here's why this is interesting. They attacked one of our boats. We're going to war. Okay. Where to World War II? What's next on the docket?
So the question is, so at the time, everyone was like, oh, America was galvanized because, yeah, they blew up one of our ships. We should go to war with them. We can't allow this, right?
Yep.
Now, fast forward and...
No. Don't fast forward.
Oh, okay.
Was there... Chris, do you know why we got into World War II?
Pearl Harbor.
Bombing of our boats.
Yeah.
I just find this very interesting. I've never even...
Well, I mean, I'm just saying that's how wars were fought predominantly.
But no, there were airplanes. There were other things.
But I mean, navies were the...
Okay, so World War II, bombing of the boats. Okay, Vietnam is the blowing up of the Gulf of Tonkin.
Gulf of Tonkin.
Which they've come out and said, that didn't really happen like what we said. Like, that's declassified. You want to talk about it? You go for it.
No. I was going to say, well, you
got to do a lot less asking you questions and more telling because we're not...
You didn't want to talk about the Lusitania.
No, we can't. I'm not very familiar with it.
Oh, I was going to say, it also came out that no, it was carrying munitions. So not recently, but in modern history, they were going to go excavate the ship or get it from the bottom of and they said, oh well, we have to be careful because it could blow up.
Oh yeah.
Well, why would it blow up? Well, because there's munitions on this boat.
Okay.
So Lake Lusitania, that was not a true statement. They blew it. The rationale for going to war was not true. The Gulf of Tonkin incident, again,
And I think what we need to say here is, sadly, lives are lost in any act of war. Typically, lives are lost. Mm-hmm. And there's all the sensibilities of that. People whose families, et cetera, who have fought in wars, died in wars. My grandfather was in the military. But that doesn't negate the fact of what was really going on to get into these wars. Because then tens of thousands and millions and however many people died in the war itself. Mm-hmm. So I think you said the Lusitania, it was later found out, well, it really wasn't what we were told.
Right.
Pearl Harbor, there are arguments of they knew the planes were coming and they came from a certain direction and all these different things. Mm-hmm. I don't know as much about that. I have studied the Gulf of Tonkin, mm-hmm. and definitely they have come out and said, well, it didn't really happen like what we said. And that was literally Johnson's argument, we're getting into the war.
Right.
We are going to Vietnam and that was a huge war with so many people dying.
Yes.
And there's so many things that you look at that and you're like, monetarily, man, it's hard to swallow. And all right, where do you go from there? I'm more fascinated by the boats argument because because this is another boat.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I think. So as we look at history, we have a history of saying, oh, look, we were attacked. So now we have to respond. Because if we don't respond, that's a problem.
Yeah. What else do they do? Oh, okay. I got to read this. Check this out. Mm-hmm. So talking about these arguments of there's something that gets us into a war, mm-hmm. right? The tragedy of 9/11, we got into a war. I was just reading General Wesley Clark, right? Remember him? Mm-hmm. He says, and then I'm literally quoting him. He says, I'd been through the Pentagon right after 9/11. About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld, Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people in the Joint Chief who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second. I said, well, you're too busy. He said, no. He says, we've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq. This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, we're going to war with Iraq? Why? He said, I don't know. He said, I guess they don't know what else to do. So I said, well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda? No. He says, there's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments. He said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. This is General Wesley Clark. And it goes on. He says, so I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time, we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He reached over his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today. And he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq, then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off with Iran. I said, is it classified? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me. I saw him a year or so ago, and I said, you remember that? He said, sir, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show it to you. Okay, so he's basically saying, oh, we're going to war with these people.
Typical government, though. They said 5 years, and it's taken like 15.
There you go. Chris, hold them honest. Yep. But so on this argument of how we get into wars, I think the term that some people call it when it's kind of assumed and known, it's called a false flag event, right? Something I learned about recently that I was like, this cannot be real, is the U.S. government declassified a document on something called Operation Northwoods.
Oh, this is the greatest. It's one of the greatest stories of all time because when people first hear it, they're like, "That's not true."
No,
it's not. It's not true.
Can't be true. I'm going to link to the PDF with their original signatures on our podcast notes. So my wife, her family being Cuban, like they've got all these stories about this time down there, how he's literally in the Bay of Pigs. He's facing Americans with, I mean, all this crazy stuff, right? Operation Northwoods, here it is. You literally can Google this still.
At least for a couple more days.
It's still there. Wikipedia will come right up to the top. And this is the first paragraph. Operation Northwoods was a proposed false flag operation against the Cuban government that originated within the U.S. Department of Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States government in 1962. The proposals called for the Central Intelligence Agency or other U.S. government operatives to commit acts of terrorism against American civilians and military targets, blaming them on the Cuban government and using it to justify a war against Cuba. The possibilities detailed in the document included the possible assassination of Cuban immigrants. See how fancy I said that? Sinking boats of Cuban refugees on the high seas, hijacking planes, blowing up a U.S. ship, and orchestrating violent terrorism in U.S. cities. The proposals were rejected by John F. Kennedy. But it got all the way to his desk with everyone's signature. We need to do this.
And in JFK, Oliver Stone's movie about Kennedy, he proposes that's why they killed him.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm. And the first time when you see that movie, when you're younger and you don't know about stuff like this, you're like, that's absurd. Then you learn about this and you're like, oh man, maybe.
Like, just think about that fact.
That's declassified.
The Joint Chiefs of Staffs, they all agreed that we're going to kill Americans, innocent Americans.
Hijack airplanes, which, by the way, I read more about it. It was hijack an airplane. This is the story. Mm-hmm. We're going to hijack an airplane full of college students on the way to Cuba, and then we're going to blow it up. Mm-hmm. And we're going to blame it on the Cubans.
What? They also had one that they were going to make a drone with nobody in it.
That's right.
And blow it up and then, meaning a much more humane version of lying to the American people, but still claim, which, this is like always interesting because when you think it through, like, let's say they had gone through with that. Like they had the drone. Do you think they would have told you there were people in it? Yes. Would they have made up names? Yes. But isn't that what Alex Jones got just lambasted for even proposing that occurred at Sandy Hook or anything like that? No, I don't know about those school shootings well enough. No, but it's like, well, once you know about stuff like this, you can't put it past them.
Yeah, and when when they literally come out and declassify, yep, we did that. You had people with 9/11 for years saying, this is in our DNA. And so you hate to hear those things like, oh my word, why would you make up such a conspiracy theory? Then you see documents like this come out and you're like, oh, we have been guilty of planning this. Like only JFK denied doing it.
And you have to remember, I don't know if I've talked about it with you guys before, but Annie Jacobs, who's this author about like tons of conspiracy theory stuff, had this guy confess to her about Area 51 and aliens, about what was really behind that. And you can read, but she goes into detail that basically it was what started the alien thing was Stalin, who was the master of propaganda, had a plan to crash land a UFO here in America that looked like it had aliens, except America found out and kept it from the public. And then they said, oh, that's kind of interesting. Let's try to see if we can make people look like aliens. So this guy claims that's what went on at Area 51. And so my point with this is...
like genetic engineering of...
Well, actually, he claims that they took kids with Down syndrome. Oh. And then did like plastic surgery to make them look like aliens because that's what Stalin did. So what the reason I'm saying that is that this sounds absurd and you're like, how could the American government ever propose this? Most governments do this. Mm-hmm. Like Stalin, World War I, like he was the king of propaganda. We should be better than that. By no means am I saying it makes an excuse, but remember, there are enemies.
Sure.
And typically you look at what your enemies are doing and you're like, oh, that worked pretty good. This is why we have to be vigilant against the government. This is why when Wesley Clark says, if you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And we have to say, it doesn't mean there's not problems. It just means it's not a nail. Like, that's my whole point with Iran. It may be a problem. Do I think war is the solution? Well, in my lifetime, that's gone really poorly.
Right.
Like, really poorly. And I've learned from that. So I'm like, nah, I don't think we need to fight a war over it. Not yet.
Yeah, this is my thing. Number one, like you said, name me the war that we've entered into in the last 60 years that was beneficial to us.
So you're saying post-World War II?
Yeah.
I mean, Korean War wasn't a total disaster. I agree.
Like, we've left places worse than we found them. Iraq was better with Saddam at the helm than it is today. Libya was better with Gaddafi at the helm than it is today.
And let's make sure we don't not point out, we had to go to war with Iraq because Saddam was such a bad leader. And you're right. The country was better off with Saddam than it is today. But our argument was he's a horrible leader. We need to go to war to take him out. How did he get in power?
We put him there.
Yeah. And so it's like, well, did we put him in power with a war? Did we put him in power with a war? No.
No.
Well, then we don't have to take him out with the war. Like, send a CIA assassin in there if it's that important. Like, we assassinate people all the time. You don't know about it, but we do it. That's why it wasn't about Saddam. It was about actually just probably disrupting the country. I mean, like Wesley Clark said, like, they had a plan. Like, why destabilize 7 countries in 5 years? Well, whatever their reason, financial, oil, whatever, they clearly had a plan and it executed.
That's what's crazy. Working. We have a general who said this years ago. This was their plan.
They're not even talking. That's what I get so mad about the news. Like, and you can find that video clip.
You can.
Where he tells that story. And it's like, literally any time they talk about going to war with Iran, they should have to play that clip where he says that there was a memo. How many years ago was that? It's like,
that was
20 years ago?
Yeah.
It was after 9/11.
Right after.
So it's like almost 19 years ago. Again, shows you how bad the government is. They thought they'd do it in 5 years. That they haven't even gotten it done in 20. How many bases do you think the U.S. government has outside of its borders?
That's interesting.
Bases?
Mm-hmm. Might be an airstrip. Might be the biggest base we have in Germany.
I'm going to say 1,000.
I'll say 400.
All right. What do you think the second most country is, and how many do they have? So, like, Russia has how many bases outside of its country? China, India, Mexico. I'm just throwing some names out.
I would say it's going to be either, I would say China.
No, I'm going to go with some Western European country. Probably has like 40, 50 bases.
I know France has a lot because France has all those places in Africa, but yeah, I don't know how many.
What you got?
This, according to what I saw today, which was from Vox, they said the entire world combined is 30, and America has 800. 800, and our bases it's estimated they cost of our military budget. It's about $100 billion just to have those bases.
International.
Yep, just the ones outside of the U.S. cost us $100 billion a year.
See, this is crazy when we're having a police crisis in Chicago.
Yeah.
Like, what?
And then like, if you go look at the statistics of what we've spent rebuilding Iraq, the rebuilding effort, and it's like, and we can't get an infrastructure bill passed here, but we've been building schools and roads and bases and
in
Iraq.
Get this. Since we got to Afghanistan, right? We went there to solve all these problems. We've been spending $1.5 million a day since we got there.
I was gonna say we have spent in Afghanistan $321 billion.
Okay.
In Iraq, $784 billion.
Okay. Imagine if that was spent in this country. Hold on. Let me say this. The drug trade in Afghanistan when we got there was, it was like, oh, there's drugs here. This is a problem. We should fix this. It's soared off the charts. There are so many drugs of opium and now marijuana. It's the top production in the world.
But wait.
Isn't it coincidental that the opium or the heroin epidemic in America seemed to coincide timing-wise with the war in Afghanistan?
No, but let me ask you this. Who do you think was the major producer for opium prior to Afghanistan?
Central and South America?
Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
What's the common denominator there?
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Tim, we do have a war on drugs, obviously.
And drug usage has not gone down.
It's working.
Not one iota in America.
No, like I
since.
said, literally, when we went to war with Afghanistan, we did not have a heroin epidemic in America.
And look at this now. It says Afghanistan is by far the biggest producer of opium in the world. According to the U.S. military, 90% of the world's heroin is made from opium grown in Afghanistan. It makes up 95% of the market in Europe, 90% of the Canadian market. And it's just like,
So here's
since
the
we got there, like,
And here's the crazy thing. So Eisenhower, in his farewell speech to America, the big part of his speech was, we must guard ourselves against the military-industrial complex. And that basically he tried to warn us, like, there's a huge driver of business behind war. And this is after, obviously, our country fought our, to date, biggest war. And it's, not big, but at the time, World War, it's like, man, we had these world wars. And he's saying, look, we may have had to do this. Like, this worked. Like, okay, we've done it, but we don't want this to become commonplace. We have to guard against this because the reality is every civilization, even after World War II, there was a real debate whether we should become a country that has global conquest. And at first the debate was no, but then when, I forget who it was, got elected, but it shifted. And that's when we bought Alaska. We got Puerto Rico and Guam, and we tried to have a little global conquest going, and then we stopped.
interesting.
It's like, that's the thing. Like, I'm just like, well, let's make up our mind. Like, you think you're Rome? Are you going to take over the world or no?
It just blows my mind. So Iran has stated, we have no desire to go to war. And anybody with any little bit of common sense would say, well, yeah, Iran can't want to go to war with America. I mean, that can't end well for them. So they say they don't want to go to war. And it just so happens that when America decides they want to go to war with Iran, suddenly Iran's attacking all these ships. And no one finds that to be the least bit.
I mean, Iran's crazy, though. Like, remember a couple years ago, they kidnapped those guys? Remember that? I'll find it. It was like maybe it was when Obama was president.
Oh, you mean when Obama traded those guys for the money?
Yeah. I'm just saying, meaning that yes, it does sound a little crazy that they would do that to the boat, but they're also a little bit of a crazy country. Like,
but I think
they could. I'm not saying they did. I'm just saying.
Okay, all right, that's
Didn't
fair.
you guys see they have video of it?
But again, looking at history,
You saw Hillary Clinton?
I also saw Hillary Clinton on Pornhub. Doesn't mean it's true.
Doesn't mean it's
I
true.
was saying, again, now it's possible they could have, but when we look at history, historically, so Iraq, we claim they had weapons of mass destruction. They didn't have them. Vietnam, we claim they bombed, the ship in the Gulf of Tonkin. They didn't actually do that. Lusitania, we claim that they... So we have a history of lying about things.
We didn't succeed on Operation Northwoods.
We didn't
But
succeed,
we wanted to.
But we wanted to.
So I think that's for me. When anybody wants to say, "Oh, it's like, come on, this is."
But I also don't like being the guy that it's like, oh, it's all conspiracy.
I agree.
So I'm just like, we have to look at it. I mean, is Pearl Harbor conspiracy? Or, did that really happen?
No, I'm not saying it's guaranteed a conspiracy.
Yeah,
I'm saying
sure.
when General Clark says,
I agree.
When General Clark says,
I agree.
I saw a memo years ago, we're going to these countries. Now, mind you,
Like,
look at
yeah.
the countries he said we're going to. So Libya, it's done.
And like you
Sudan
said-
is done.
And let me be
Syria, done.
Yeah, they're all done except for Iran, which is the last one. And here's my thing with it, which is it would be a lot less suspicious if Trump had got elected and said, I love Obama's policy with Iran. I'm going to keep it intact. We're going to work towards, a good future with Iran. And then all of a sudden, Iran bombed a boat and we said, we have to go to war. That would be less suspicious. But that's not what happened. Trump said, I think we have to go to war with Iran. Then they bombed one of our boats.
And John Bolton has been
Or
trying
not
to
one
go
of
to war with Iran for years
Yeah.
prior to Trump getting elected.
Okay, here we go. All right, check this out. I'm reading a few. I'm going to post all these links, but this is very interesting. It says, with the beat of Washington's war drums continuing to grow, particularly following the Monday revelation of a government plan to send as many as 120,000 troops to counter Iran, the threat of an accidental provocation or a false flag is also becoming increasingly likely. And this is from a site called Mint Press. As Mint Press recently reported, the possibility of an accident leading to open conflict between the U.S. and Iran is now being openly stated by top European officials, such as UK Foreign Minister Jeremy Hunt, following meetings with noted Iran hawk and current Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Then it goes into this. It says, the fear is that Iran, once the United States attacks it, will be faced with the Hobson's choice. Either fire its missiles, its main non-obsolete weapon, or risk the U.S. destroying them. False flag operations mean having an attack blamed upon another nation, which actually was not the culprit. And it says, Secretary of State Pompeo has set us up by publicly stating, this is all their opinion, but I thought it was interesting, publicly stating that any attack on any American soldier in Iraq or Syria would cause America to attack Iran. He's put every soldier at risk of death by some Israeli or Saudi fanatic. Okay, hold on, I'm continuing here. Then it says, both Secretary of State Pompeo and Vice President Pence are profound end times evangelicals. This is where it gets interesting to me. In 2017, I wrote, Iraq, Syria, Iran, are we to destroy Iran next? About the original neoconservative program to remold the Middle East. A main new concern is Trump's Secretary of State's strong evangelical beliefs in the end times. The New York Times described his beliefs, the rapture and the real world. Pompeo blends belief and policy, and there's a link to this we'll share. The belief is that a stronger and greater Israel will bring about Armageddon sooner, and their rapture straight to heaven without a judgment day. Like, this is evangelical Christianity. Not all evangelicals are in this camp, like Jimmy Carter and others, but rather an important sector who moved from forecasting Armageddon to trying to bring it about. Destroying Iran being a threat to Israel is thus seen as helping God's intentions. So there's a strong argument. It's a holy war, right? Financial Times links to a Guardian article quoting Pompeo saying this. So this is our Secretary of State. Pompeo told a church congregation in Wichita 3 years ago, it is a never-ending struggle until the rapture. Be a part of it. Be in the fight. Pompeo's actions as a Christian Zionist are described in a New Republic article, The Christianization of U.S. Foreign Policy. This theory, and I think this is good to note, this theory of the rapture and all these different arguments about Israel and the Middle East was originated in the mid-1800s by an Irish priest, John Darby, that Jews returned to Jerusalem and would finally bring about the second coming and Armageddon based on his interpretation of the Bible's chapter in Revelation. That is profound. Like even going back to another episode we had about free speech and not respecting one religion, like what happens when your government officials are having their religion influence foreign policy?
Are you aware that we have laws in like 12 states that say if you are a business and you boycott doing business with Israel, you can't get a state contract?
Really?
Were you aware of that?
I was not aware of that.
Ted Cruz is a big proponent of these laws, and it's right now going to the federal level. Rand Paul was like one guy like vehemently against it and saying this is against free speech.
It's utterly ridiculous.
But my point is, it goes exactly with what you say. These people are trying to bring about the end of the world by making sure Israel's strong. That's what you're telling us? That's the basis of what you're saying?
That Israel is strong and all their enemies are gone.
And then
so thus you can understand anyone's suspicion of who's really behind a memo that General Wesley Clark reads that says, hey, by the way, we're going to take out all these countries. There's a common ingredient with all those countries. They're Muslim. It's back to the Crusades, Dark Ages, every one of them.
So how do you protect America? My solution is that you basically go back and say the only way we can go to war is if you're willing to have a draft.
You think that solves the problem?
I do. I do, because I think people like, even right now, like the likelihood of going to Iran, I'm like, we aren't even done with Iraq and it's been like 10 or 15 years. Really, people are going to be all for going to Iran. But the major problem is not enough people deal with it. It's a very small group. I don't know. I'm just proposing, to me, it would just be a lot harder decision to vote to go to war if you had to go face voters whose kids have to go to Iran.
But
yeah, that's interesting.
But we don't need a draft. We have a big enough military.
No, I know. I'm saying size down the military. We're out of control. And then when we want to go to war, we'll draft.
And we have private militaries too.
And even if you just said it's a way to deter us going to war, I'm for it.
I don't think it would deter us though.
I'm for
Yeah,
it.
I don't think it would either.
Or you could say, look, we're not going to have the military like we've been having. We're going to do what Israel does, where it's mandatory that you serve. And if you happen to be serving when we go to war, then you probably have your legs blown off like everybody else. Like, I'm just saying that it makes it real. You know, if
Yeah,
you're like, oh, am I going to vote for Ted Cruz again? No, because he sent my kid to war and his legs got blown off.
You're right. It would become more personal.
And what
my
the
cousin,
only
my
way-
nephew, my niece.
The only thing these senators care more about than everything is getting reelected. That's all they really care about.
Yeah.
And bringing about the end of the world through Armageddon with Israel.
Right. So back to that
little detail.
It's interesting because, like you said, the Trump administration, they've agreed with Israel on every turn, naming Jerusalem their capital, taking ownership of like the Golan Heights or these, what do you call it? These settlements, Jewish settlements in the Palestinian areas. Like you said, it's as if they're trying to just bring about chaos.
Yeah, it's amazing when we just bring in all these ingredients. But I just think we talked about one time the importance of educating people on people's different religious beliefs, even if you don't agree with them. But I think more people should understand what is the evangelical belief system, because there are people who believe it's driving foreign policy. You should at least know it. Whether you're an atheist and you hate God and you want nothing to do with it, you should at least know who your government leaders, what they're doing, why they believe what they do, because it may influence how people vote, how people live, and how people, forget all that, how people view the news and what they're being told is true or not.
Well, the sad thing is most people aren't very aware of what's really going on in the world. Like,
Tim, this is what's so crazy to me. All right. Everyone, that's a generic statement. So many people believe what they're told. And I'm like, what world did you live in? Were you not lied to as a kid? Did your brothers and sisters and friends not trick you and lie to you? Like, why are people so trusting to, well, I mean, that's what happened.
I wish I knew. My whole life, people have been like, dude, you're such a conspiracy theorist. But 9 times out of 10, the theories that I've purported, they come out to be true. Like I said, later down the road. When things are happening, it's easy to say, oh yeah, that this is the narrative they're putting forth. It's easy to believe that. Then 20 years later, 30 years later, comes out, oh, you mean the CIA was selling crack in the hood?
Let me give you one. And I put this here, but I'm not going to read it all. The Reichstag is on fire? Send the majority Nazi police to investigate it. And, this is the communists that set the building on fire. And literally, they go into power, the Nazis, and then, I love this, it says, they established this act that abolished freedom of speech, assembly, privacy, and the press, legalized phone tapping and interception of correspondence, and suspended the autonomy of federated states. And then you have Nazi Germany. Like, people just need to be suspicious in history. Like, things can happen. You can be told, this is who did this. And then even they argued, this is where all the freedoms disappeared. And I remember I got this quote from Newt Gingrich after the Patriot Act was implemented. He said, I strongly believe Congress must act now to rein in the Patriot Act, limit its use to national security concerns, prevent it from developing mission creep into areas outside of national security. So you can see, what was that statement I think Bush made? Never let a good crisis go to waste. It's like, that's kind of the MO of all these things.
I think people, it's going to be controversial. I think people are so believing. You ask why are people so believing? Because of God. Because of their religion. I think everybody's pretty much taught about God in America, meaning most Americans are taught some level of Christianity, the vast majority. And I would say most of them never experience anything to teach them that that is the truth. They've accepted it from when they were young. It'd be like if you never were told Santa Claus was not real. You'd still believe in Santa Claus as long as the presents kept showing up. But there really is no evidence of God. And if you think about it critically and say, if you were born in China, do you think you would have still ended up a Christian? No. Because the Chinese government doesn't teach you anything about God. You know nothing about it. And so my point is, from a very young age, you're taught this thing that's abstract, that there are powerful people who know better than you, who are in control of your life, this is why when you grow up in a religious community and you're a skeptic, it just doesn't work. They actually hate you because you're ruining it for the other kids that are easily believing.
So, okay.
And so you're trained your whole life, like, just believe what the authorities say. It's written in this book over thousands of years. It has to be a fact. That book doesn't make sense to anybody who's skeptical. You have to have a personal relationship with that book and with God in order to make sense of what's in that book. If you're a skeptic, it all sounds crazy. So what happens is most people, though, it's such an important part of their life. Their parents taught them, their grandparents, their siblings, their teachers, that then they're in this mantra of like, oh, there's these authorities. And I say it all the time. I'm 100% with you. Like, I always laugh. Like, my brother said he had his kid riding up front one day. They went to the gas station to get a pop or whatever, soda.
Let's get it straight.
And this guy sees him and he's like, hey, your kid's too young to ride in the front seat because he's below the weight limit or whatever. And Ryan's like, yeah, I don't really care about that law. I'm a safe driver and he's fine. No, it's against the law. My brother's like, and I don't care. That's a law I don't follow. I don't agree with it. I think I am responsible enough for my own son. And this guy, this stranger, couldn't get it through his head that my brother just said, no, I don't agree with the law and I'm going to do different. But that's how most people are. There's laws. They're in the Bible. You're taught to you. And it's like, once you get that upbringing, you're kind of ruined because they teach you can't question.
Okay, let me ask you that. I think that's very interesting. I don't know this statistic, but it seems like, are there more people in America that have the freedom to be an atheist than other parts of the world? And here's where I'm going, so we can reverse back to that. The argument of Americans seem very gullible, and just seem like that. So you're saying, well, it's because they were taught, believe in something, have faith, and you can't prove it. But even on the other side of the coin, I don't want anything, and I'm just saying this in this growing trend in America, especially with millennials, I want nothing to do with religion. I believe we evolved from monkeys, the Big Bang Theory, I believe it. I believe all these scientific things. Isn't that argument, well, you're believing things you can't prove, you can't reproduce, right? I mean, don't let me convince you.
But you've started on a premise I'm already Googling, which is that millennials aren't Christians.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, well, no, I know the data. More millennials are becoming against Christians or atheists than any other segment.
Yeah.
But they're putting faith in, I think we evolved.
But faith...
A belief in you can't something replicate. Science is you could replicate it.
Well, first of all, I would disagree. I can replicate evolution. It happens every day. I can put a fish, they have these studies, they put fish in dark water and within 4 generations, it'll be born without eyes.
Well, but that...
I mean, adaptation.
Yeah, but I'm talking the transition of species stuff. Monkeys to humans. People believe that. Just follow my argument. Whether we debate
I am
that,
following your argument. I might believe that.
All right, well, that's fine. But it still takes faith. Even you said 4 generations.
But faith is a weird word to me because faith implies, like this is what happens. Faith implies, like I have faith. To me, that implies like I believe in this in response to like I need to for this outcome. I don't have faith that evolution occurred. I don't care.
No. Faith
doesn't matter to me.
Faith is not indicative or necessary.
I know. I'm just saying that's how it is to me. When you say I have faith in evolution, no, I don't know what I believe. I wasn't there for either one. I can't find any reliable sources on either.
Okay, then let's use a different expression.
Right, but that would mean. But if you believe in it, that means you have faith in it.
No, I just said I don't believe in either.
I thought you said.
No, I said I don't believe. I don't know. I wasn't there for either. They both sound kind of crazy to me.
All right, but that's fine. Let me just prove my point here. People trusting and believing, that's some people's version of faith. Trusting, believing in, you know what? I think there was a big explosion and then Earth started 65 billion years ago.
Sure.
You can't prove that.
No.
You can have a good theory and you can give all your reasons. Oh, Chris, this is why I believe that. We have a growing segment in America that believes that. Then you have other people, I believe a being spoke it and it all came out of nowhere in a lesser amount of time ago. I would argue both take some trusting and believing in either books you're going to read, people's opinions, et cetera, et cetera. At the end of the day, you have to say, nope, I believe this one makes more sense to me. So my question is there something in American DNA that leads us to believe things we can't see more than other cultures? Because I would feel like, yeah, it seems like it. We just believe stuff you can't even prove. Therefore, the media is like, hey, this happened. Oh, wow, this happened.
That's what I was going to say. I think that America deals with propaganda more than anybody else.
More than North Korea?
Well, no, but I mean, North Korea is...
I'm just saying, I understand what you're saying. I don't know that I agree. Like, I'm asking myself, like, I think like we're probably just like the rest of the world. I think most societies throughout history.
When I say other people, you chose North Korea. I mean, come on,
Chris.
Chris.
Like in Russia, like Putin is planning those vases, antique vases, and then he scuba dives down and finds them. He plays
Right,
all.
and you act like Russians believe that.
I think they do.
Exactly. And why do you believe that?
Because I think they're gullible like Americans.
Because you are victim to American propaganda.
The same way
It's childish. Russians aren't that
The same
dumb.
way Americans believe that Bush was out there whacking on his ranch every weekend. Like, yeah, I'm sure he was.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
yep, that guy worth $800 million. He likes to get out there and cut the weeds down.
I love the Russia and America thing because the propaganda in Russia is the same as propaganda in America.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Americans think like, oh, these Russians.
No, I think we're equal.
No,
is my point.
I know. But you're not the majority of Americans would say Russia is full of propaganda, blah, 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 blah.
I'd say,
and
yep.
Russians believe the same thing about America.
Yep.
And the reality is Russia and America are exactly the same.
We do it differently. It's the same propaganda. They do it through state-run media. We do it through private media, but it's still propaganda.
That's fair.
You know, I mean, that's where, like I said, going back, yeah, I mean, we would hope that America would be better, but I don't think we are. But I do think that, to me, it's better to have a questioning society than one that accepts everything.
Oh, I would agree with you.
I would think that it's more likely that your country will run longer because it's the swing and the balances.
But we're losing that.
We've lost.
Questioning society?
Well,
no, I think we're gaining it.
What?
No, I do.
In these,
Like your point with millennials is a prime example. Like nobody in my generation switched from what their parents believed. Like everybody I know that was raised this religion, they're that religion today for the most part.
But I don't think they're not.
Like you're telling me millennials.
And you're saying, well, what is your argument there? That they are questioning more? They're just not believing something.
Well, that's questioning what you're taught. Meaning if you're taught there's a God and he spoke the world into existence, you go, I don't know if I believe that. That's questioning.
But they're not necessarily taught that. I would say that they're being taught more so through education and through television, which is Hollywood and education leans left, as we well know.
Yeah, that's true.
And millennials lean left. So they're not questioning. They're just going along with what they're told.
Because if they were going towards something else, I'd agree with you. But they have new religions. You can't deny service to anyone. You can't say that. Like it's like, oh, that's interesting. That's what the media thinks.
Yeah, that's true.
Like the divergent thinking, or no, that's not the right word. Contrarian thinking. It's like this little bitty thing. So you can just see as you look at democracies in history, it gets a little concerning when the mob just says, "Silence those people." So I think what you said is very interesting to me. And you can't really say religious, you have to say Christian. Is our Christian culture, Christianized culture, does it lead Americans to be more gullible? That's interesting.
You say more gullible, but I would say, just make sure you're understanding, like, I think Chinese are equally as gullible. It's just, what are we holding up as the authoritarian figure? Like, if you go back, like, they used to hold up the king. Julius Caesar is like a god. And people are like, oh man, he can do anything. He's got lightning bolts or whatever they believed. And I'm saying what happened in history and I think Julius Caesar in particular was like, oh man, these people are pretty receptive to the idea that there's a being up here. Like one, not gods. And so I just think it's a very powerful way to accomplish what's always been done in history, which is make the masses subservient to the authority. It's just once you introduce an afterlife, it's a totally different thing.
Explain, what do you mean?
Well, if I'm in China, and I don't know Chinese culture well enough, but if there's no talk of an afterlife, but they're like, this is the authority, Xi Jinping, and this family, and this is they're the authority, you must believe what they say. And it's like, okay, but if I believe what they say and my life here's pretty crappy, it's like, I don't know if I agree with them. Like my life's not that good, and they're saying this is the best way to live. But if I am part of a community and they say, look, this is how you need to live, and I go, oh, man, they're telling me what to do, but my life's pretty crappy. They're like, oh, that's okay. This is just a mere few hundred years. And then we're going to be taken to this place, whether that's Islam or Christianity. It gives you real power over people that not believing in God doesn't give you. When you don't believe in God, the masses say, this is my life and I got to get it better now. We got to have a revolt because I'm hungry and my kids are hungry. But when you don't believe in this was Ptolemy or whatever was like this first Christian martyr in the gladiator arena. And it was like they were about to kill her and she took the sword herself stuck it right in her neck and killed herself. And the Roman Empire is like, oh crap. Like, because they were persecuting and killing Christians, and then they're like volunteering. Like, why? Well, because they believe in an afterlife. And that's really when you saw the Roman Empire shift from like, we don't believe in God to like, we got to take over God. This is powerful. This is something that we can use to tell people it's okay your life is crappy. It's okay that you are going to die in a war here for us because you're going to be serving in this afterlife. So I think that's what makes us more gullible. We're like, this is not even an important thing. Like, I'll just do what they tell me no matter how my life is.
Yeah, no, I just find it fascinating these days when you have people on both sides of the camp. This is true, and you're lost if you don't believe this, but it's on the side of no religion too. This scientific fact is true, and if you don't believe it, well, you're stupid. It's like, come on, you can't prove what you're saying. Just like the religious person can't prove what they're saying. But we should both be able to say, all right, you believe that. But what I think where it starts to really crumble, especially as we talk about holy wars, is no, mine's right, yours is wrong. And death to the loser.
Yes.
Right. And that's really, I mean, that's war. I mean, that's one argument of war. The other argument is money. Just
Which is like
selfishness.
It's like a God.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's America's God.
You're your own God.
But that's like you said, that's the problem when we have debates. Like even if we're going to have an Iran war debate, let's say that's going to be what's occurred. Very quickly, people will choose a side, right? Clearly, I think most of us are anti at this point. And then that's our side. It'll be
no
our side.
changing it.
It'll be our side if we go to war. It will be our side if we dominated that war and it proved to be the best decision. We'd still figure out a way to say why it wasn't, and vice versa. And that's where I see like America struggling, which is like it's okay. And I'd use myself as an example. Tim asked me at the very beginning of this debate, did I support the war in Iraq? Yeah. I had much different understanding of the world. Looking back, that was a horrible decision on my part. So it's informed my future decisions. So if I'm going to be anti-war with Iran and we go and it's a great decision, because a lot of times war, like I'm not naive enough to think that there'll be no more wars need to be fought. The rest of we always have had war throughout history, but from here on out, there won't need to be any. There probably needs to be some wars here and there. I hate that. Maybe there doesn't, but I have to take each one with the information I have. And that's what happened to me was I didn't live through the Vietnam War. I didn't live through the Korean War. My dad served in Vietnam, and it was interesting to have his viewpoint because like we're a pretty patriotic family. My grandpa served in World War II. I thought about serving. My dad was proud to serve, but he told me some stories about, coming back. And I could tell my dad never was like, outwardly proud. And then when the Iraq War came, it was unique because if you remember when the Iraq War came, we were so patriotic. If you remember this, we went back and were actually really appreciative and patriotic to the people that served in Vietnam. And, I wasn't, like I said, I didn't experience that, but I watched my dad. He brought out his medals that he got from Vietnam. He put some pictures up. And it was like, I realized like he spent a lifetime being ashamed that he had served in that war. It wasn't his choice. The government drafted him and he went to war and he probably felt guilty about it for 25 years. Now, I'm not saying you should be proud of, but you shouldn't feel ashamed. And so that all weighed into my decision to go, like the idea of like supporting Iraq. Like I want to be proud of these people. Like I felt for my dad. I think that war affected my dad his entire life. But then I watched Iraq and it was like, it sounded exactly what we complained about with Vietnam. It was like, okay, now I've lived through it once and I understand. Doesn't mean we don't support the people that go fight. Doesn't mean that those people haven't done our country a service, if you will. But it doesn't mean that we just have to blindly go to war.
Chris, do you think there's an argument today with what some people would call a snowflake generation that they don't know war? You don't know what it's like to lose a friend or his legs to be blown off. So it's easy to just think, oh, they're bad, they're good, Well, not really invested. Different. Like if you go look, like I just watched that new documentary, the World War I one that they put to color and sound. It's really interesting because it only plays real audio clips of guys that fought in World War I. So they're obviously really old. This
before
one
they died.
Where you found all the data?
No, I don't think so.
About who died, how many died?
Oh no, that's a different one.
You got to share that.
That's an Oliver Stone one.
One of the best documentaries ever.
That one's great. I'll find the name. We'll have to post it. But no,
I think it's called The Untold History of America.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. No, this is like one. It's just like it shows you World War I like in color, which you've never seen. They've colorized it, and then they've added like sound, and they play these clips. And my point, what you're asking about the snowflake generation is, dude, it was crappy.
Right.
Like they're in trenches, guys are getting blown up and gassed. I mean, it's bad. And then we went from that to World War II.
People of their own age.
Yes. You go to World War II, it's like, oh my God, you hear about the thing. But my point with that is life was pretty crappy around then too.
Sure.
All you did was manual labor. I mean, you sometimes went a little hungry. I mean, life was hard. Life expectancy was a lot lower. So when you say like it's the snowflake generation, like, yes, we've evolved as humans, like as a society, like, because now you look and it's like it seems like a lot of people have PTSD or whatever. And it's like, I don't not think that's real, but it is a cause of the fact that we are a different society than we were in World War II. So knowing that, you have to say, well, then we have to treat war differently, or we have to make sure that people feel good about it. Like in World War II, most of those people came back home and went back to their life thinking I saved the world.
That's right.
I did a good thing. And I would say killing somebody, I can't imagine that's ever easy for most people. But if you killed somebody because you believed it saved the world, it would be less hard. But when you go to Iraq, you shot some kids and blew up some women, and you come back and people like us are on podcasts saying, I mean, it was stupid to go to war. It didn't do anything. It made it worse. And
how do you feel?
It's harder to deal with it. And and a lot of these guys come back and they know that. They know that reality. It makes it a lot harder to deal with.
Yeah, that's a good point. Have we answered all your questions, Tim, that you had?
More or less. Yeah. I would just like people to, when approaching war, to ask relevant questions. I'm not saying that we should never go to war, but making an informed decision. One, is this place going to be better off than when we found it? Two, is this going to be financially viable for our country? And are the reasons we're going real legitimate reasons?
I like all those questions. And I would say the one that'll make you could ask one question that I think would answer all the rest, which is, am I willing to go to war personally or send my kid? Like, if you're willing to go to war with Iran right now, like physically you're willing to go to Iran and risk IEDs, like you really believe it's of benefit. Mm-hmm. But if you're just saying, I believe enough that our country should borrow money, which is what we do for every war, we should borrow money. So I would say two things. Yeah. One, are you willing to go, and are you willing to have your taxes go up?
That's right.
And if you can say yes to those, I won't argue, because I say I don't get to see classified documents. But if you can't answer yes to those, then I would be like, well, then you probably have to agree with me and say no.
But I love that. I'm glad you said that, because people say that. Well, we don't have all the information, which is true, but you still have most of it, and you can make an informed decision. Like, what?
No, my argument was going to be, well, and I always say, I don't have all the information. Why it's important that you trust the people that you elect that do have the information. So it's not an excuse. Like, I don't have all the information, which is why currently I'm anti-war, because like the guy with the information, I don't trust. I don't trust him to make that decision for me. If you said, if he decides to go to war, it's going to result in my taxes going up and me going to Iran to fight. And I say, I don't trust that guy. You better get somebody else in there and let him, get somebody I trust, because we'll never get to see the information.
Yeah, but when it came to the Iraq war, Congress was more or less behind it. They voted overwhelmingly to support the Iraq war. And people were saying, well, they have information we don't have. They have information about these weapons of mass destruction. And I was very skeptical based upon the history of what I know about the Middle East and America going to war. Now, I wasn't guaranteed I was right. I was just a theory I had, but I said, it doesn't sound quite right. Just like I would say today with Iran. I'm not saying Iran is not trying to produce nukes, but the way things currently stand, I'm not a fan of going to war with Iran based upon the finances behind it, based upon, like Chris said.
Like, what's the CIA doing? Like, let them deal with the crap. That's like, if you go listen, Annie Jacobs, like I said, she's this author, and it's like, she talks about these operators. We're killing a bunch of people in the world with CIA assassins. To me, that's a fact.
Well, Chris.
So let's get them over there in Iran. Let's get them going.
Well, that doesn't help our jobs program.
I know.
It's interesting. I saw a statistic that said America spends on our military what the next 13 countries do combined.
But we don't spend the most percentage of GDP. Do you know who does?
Yeah, but we borrow lots of money.
No, I know, but it's a little misleading statistic, because our economy is huge. And if you look at percentage of GDP, right? Like every government spends tax dollars as a percentage of GDP.
And you're
It's
including defense spending and everything else.
Yep. So here, to get, the crazy thing is there's some crazy things here. I found this week. Who do you think, it's not America, spends the highest percentage of GDP on their military? Biggest military budgets as a percent of GDP.
I mean, it would have
Because
to
we
be
always get this America statistic, and so I was like, is that true?
it would have to be a poorer country.
My thing is
Well, that's a good guess, which is like it can't be one with a huge economy. I wouldn't say it's a poor country.
I would say this.
I'd just say it doesn't have a huge economy.
To me, my theory was there's one country that defense is
But
what
you
they
can't
do.
ruin it. You already know.
But this is my guess anyways.
But you already know. I already did these with you.
I know, but I'm telling you, this was my guess anyways.
Okay.
I guessed correctly. I'm telling you why I guessed
All right,
correctly.
tell me.
You
Hit, hit me
you
with
guessed
it.
a couple of them.
No, I guessed the one. Isn't the one?
All right, don't ruin it. Take a guess.
Man, militarily.
It's an ally.
Let's say I
I mean, I
guessed
picked like
correctly.
some
The top two are allies.
Britain.
Think about this. Who
They are on the
defense
list.
is what they do.
They are on the list.
That's what they do.
This is the top
Defend
12.
themselves. This is their sole purpose is defense of themselves.
To give you an example, we spend
Israel.
Yes.
Israel is number 2. We spend 3.2% of our GDP on military. The top country spends 8. Israel spends 4. It's interesting,
All
right?
Tell me, who is it?
Saudi Arabia, which is who? The number 1 purchaser of American military equipment. It's really still America.
Okay, hold on a
I say
second.
I don't even.
So
count
I just want to make sure you guys understand this. Saudi Arabia is number 1, Israel's number 2, Russia is number 3, and America is number 4. But if you take and say, well, Israel and Saudi Arabia, most of the money they're spending is with America. They're proxy military.
No, I disagree about Israel. Saudi Arabia, I agree. Saudi Arabia, that's just them giving kickbacks to America. Like,
Well, in a way, but you remember they're bordered with Iran. I mean, Saudi Arabia is.
all right, but I think that number is to me not a real number.
That's
to me,
interesting.
Israel it makes sense as the
It's not. Tim just dismisses a.
no because the thing,
not real.
Saudi Arabia they buy America's munitions as a way to
They're fighting wars. Saudi Arabia, like just recently, like they bombed Yemen. This is a big problem. And they go and they look, and the serial number is from America. I mean, they've been dropping bombs for a while.
no I'm aware, but then I don't think they buy enough. Like a lot of the wars they fight are America's proxy wars.
I mean, I kind of feel like it's a base. It's a very large base in the Middle East.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that Russia's number 3. They spend a little bit more than America as a percentage of GDP.
Dollar amount, though, it's
Dollar amount's insane. I mean, America, because our economy is so big. I mean, it's huge. But this is what's
But we're also
interesting.
borrowing,
But
so I'm
hey,
like-
wait. Are we that much bigger than China?
our economy.
Yeah. No, it's pretty much, we're right there. China-
Their yearly budget is in the trillions like us.
For the military?
Oh, no. I'm talking just overall.
Their GDP's up there. I'll look that up in a minute. But their military budget's only about 2% of their GDP. And that's like one of my examples. I'm like, we say China's our biggest enemy. How many wars has China fought in our lifetime? We
I
fought
don't know of any.
Korea, Vietnam, Iraq twice, and Afghanistan, and we're talking about going to Iran. How many wars has China fought?
0?
None, as far as I know. I mean, little like
have
they're
little skirmishes
They're doing
and-
little skirmishes,
yeah,
but that
yeah,
I'm not counting.
Yeah, no, I know.
Our skirmish in Syria. I'm not counting that. I mean, we fought, and like I can go back. Like let's go back. So
We're perpetually at war.
we're always. This is my point. Almost every decade, we find a way to get into war, and I'm like, China's not doing that. And again, they're killing us financially, killing it.
Well,
no, doesn't mean
that's
they
not,
don't.
That's not their jobs program.
It doesn't mean they don't spend money on their military. They're a pretty big spender.
What are they doing, though, if they're not going to war? Like, at least to Wesley Clark, hey, we got guys, we're going to war. Like, what are the Chinese doing?
Well, they are trying to take back a lot of islands that we basically, us and Britain took away from them.
Well, they got to stand
But
on
by
by for
force?
America.
Well, they're building. They're building military bases
Oh,
on
okay.
a bunch of disputed islands as a way. It's crazy, but basically, there's the rule is you get a certain amount of miles off of your coast, and then that water is yours, right? And there's all these islands that are in main shipping ports that are kind of like in dispute, and China's been going out there and putting an airstrip on it, and then being like, "It's ours."
Interesting.
Now we get the water.
Yeah.
And like you saw, I mean, like it's crazy. We probably need to do like an episode with China, but not like how we always are about surveillance and stuff. But like what's going on with Hong Kong?
Yeah, that's
Hong
interesting.
Kong's going to get handed back to China.
You're right.
It's like it's an interesting thing. It's a democracy, really, right there next to an authoritarian regime that wants it back.
They sure do.
It's interesting.
They
I don't
sure
know
do.
much about it, so. So the list is Saudi Arabia, Israel, Russia, United States, Turkey, India, France, Australia, China, United Kingdom, Canada, and Germany. As far as percentage.
That's interesting. What else we got? Any last thoughts? Chris?
I'm just gonna second what Tim said. If the Iran thing continues, just keep asking yourselves: are you willing to have your taxes go up? Because whether we borrow the money or don't borrow the money, somebody has to pay for war, and it's really expensive. And number two, somebody's kids or somebody is gonna have to go over there and just like Iraq, get blown up, get their legs blown off. Are you willing to have that be you or somebody you love? Because it's gonna be somebody. And if you say yeah in both those accounts, then that's your opinion.
Then you believe in it.
Then you really do believe in it. You believe in strong enough that you're willing to make a sacrifice.
Like I say, since 9/11, we have spent over $1 trillion on war. $1 trillion. And what do we have to show for it? What have we gained as America for this $1 trillion we spent?
And the argument would be, well, we haven't had another attack. And I would say, yeah, but we've had a lot more people die from auto accidents. We should spend that $1 trillion
From opium
on
epidemics.
saving autos from killing people.
From the opioid epidemic, which is based out of Afghanistan. So it's actually linked to the war. But yes.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think some people would argue, well, we've brought democracy to countries around the world, and it's like,
But we don't care about that. Iran had democracy.
I know.
They had it, and we took it.
Some people
Iraq
would
had
argue.
it, and we took it. Like, we don't care. I can't let people lie. Like you said, some people would say that, but I can't accept that. That's not our goal to go into war. We've never shown that's our goal. Now, I do think you could argue that we have kept Soviet communism from spreading across the globe. Meaning, we've been fighting wars, and during that time...
That's pretty much only Afghanistan, right?
No, I mean, I'm saying since we started fighting in Vietnam, I'm saying since World War II. And remember, Russia and the Soviet Union has proven to be a big problem for the world. I mean, they're a big part of World War I, and I mean, Stalin was a real problem. Soviet Union was a real threat to us. And many would argue that through our defense spending, that helped cripple them, through our support of Saudi Arabia, through being this proxy military industrial complex, the Soviet Union is dispersed. So you could, and again, I think it's like Iran, like that was a real threat. It doesn't mean that was the only way to do it. That's why I say you have to look at it and say, oh, that was a good result. Can we achieve similar result with Iran without spending all that money and all those lives?
And I think some people would ask, why aren't we going to defend or do human rights things in places of Africa where, hey, this is going on? We're arguing about Assad in Syria. And I think people are suspicious there. Well, there's no oil. There's no Israel complex, like what we talked about.
The other thing you have to start looking at, because I read an article this week, because oil is interesting, it's always been a thing, but like rare earth minerals. And Afghanistan does pretty well in that category, interestingly enough. So you do have to start, like you said, you have to start asking yourself, like, it's like what Tim says. You got to be questioning. Like, hey, what other reasons might we want to go to war? Let me go look at some stuff.
That's good. You've been listening to Rhodium Radio. As you can see, we're having a good time, and we hope you are too. For more episodes like this, go to rhodiumradio.com. We'll see you next time.